Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Rick Ingraham Talks to Strangers. And now, here's your host, Rick Ingraham.
Guys, you just missed the greatest intro of all time. It didn't work out, and so now we're not even going to relive it, but it was crazy. People started applause breaking. There were people here for some reason, and then they left, and now, you know, it's not quite as hyped up as it was, but podcast is still going to be good. I got Mike Knox here. Is that right? Mike Knox?
That's right.
It would be weird if that was the first K that you pronounced in the history of the KN.
It would.
Yeah, would have been bizarre. Well, thank you for being here, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit about yourself from the beginning. Where are you from?
I'm from Pasadena, California.
You're born and raised?
Born and raised.
Wow. Yeah, very rare that we get real people of Southern California.
It is. Most people move out here from some other place, or you kind of see them wandering around Hollywood sometimes.
You get a lot of the worst people from other places.
Kind of like Vegas without the gambling, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a lot of people, I know, not a lot, but a handful of people moved to Vegas in the last couple of years. And I always go, why'd you move to Vegas? Thinking they're going to have, well, I was offered an opportunity. But it's always just like LA's just getting terrible, so.
Right. I just got up and ran. And
yeah, I didn't want to go too far, but and I'm like, but Vegas is just the worst part of Los Angeles, essentially.
It's too tempting for me. I'd lose all my money on the first day gambling.
Yeah.
I can't go.
Do you gamble?
No, but I know that if I
you
lived
would.
there, I would, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't get it. It's fun for a very limited amount of time in Vegas.
Yeah,
that's how I look at it.
You lose all your money, yeah.
You lose some money. All it took was one good week or weekend where I lost more money than I wanted to, and I'm like, I will never appreciate this terrible place ever again.
Agreed.
Yeah. Pasadena's nice, though.
Yes.
It's pretty nice up there.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah.
Did you go to public high school up there?
I did. I went to San Marino High.
San Marino. That's even nicer.
That's very nice. There's like butterflies.
They have the garden. And
I can't afford to live there, but yeah, it's nice. Very nice.
Fair enough. What'd your parents do?
My dad was a insurance broker for all the schools there, but he lived at the racetrack. So he was he had a couple race horses. He had one that was a second longest long shot in Hollywood history.
Wow.
So
that's pretty cool. It's a good claim.
Yeah, he was at the track a long time and brought me there all the time. And
nice. So you grew up, get to see not a darker side, but a different side.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's people coming with a lunchbox full of coins. Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah.
A lunchbox full of coins might be the most disturbing description I've ever seen. What I know about you is that you were a prison guard.
Yes.
Where were you a prison guard at?
At Lancaster Prison. So it's the only prison in LA County.
Lancaster.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had a prison, but to me, Lancaster feels like a prison.
Yeah, I mean, just going there is pretty much feeling like a
prison.
Yeah. So it's a great place for a prison. Yeah.
And then there used to be a guy here who hung out, not every night, but a lot of nights, and he was just full of shit. He was just the type of dude he claimed he was everywhere there was. Anything famous that ever happened. So you'd be like, oh man, I wish I could have been at Woodstock to see Jimi Hendrix. And he'd be like, interesting story. And then you'd listen to it and you'd be like, this dude is full of shit. He fucked Janis Joplin at a Three Dog Night concert. He witnessed Jimi Hendrix play the Star Spangled Banner for the first time and light his guitar on fire. He ran kicks back for the Raiders in the late 60s. Just one of those things where you're just like, wow.
It's all the stuff you can't fact check.
Yeah, nothing that you can prove. Right. Where you're like, oh, but you're only on preseason. So
you're like Three Dog Night. That sounds believable.
Yeah. Listen, if you told me you fucked someone at Three Dog Night concert, I'd be like, that's pretty random. Yeah. If it's Janis Joplin, I'm like, now this seems a little shady. If I said, how on earth did you fuck Janis Joplin? What led to that? Well, I was doing the spotlight for Three Dog Night at the time, and there's a couple songs where I faded the spotlight in so well. She came up to the booth and just started asking questions. Next thing you know, we're fucking. I'm like, okay, it's a believable story. But he moved to Lancaster, so I don't have to see him anymore. It's far enough away.
Very far away.
How far? It's what, 2 hours drive?
From here, at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
in traffic.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
3 to 4 years in traffic.
Yes.
So how do you become a prison guard? What leads to that?
So I was doing an internship in college, and I was doing it at the probation. And the guy in charge was like, "You got a degree? Don't worry about it. We're going to prison. Put you in a tower. You're going to be great." So I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be a parole agent. You had to work in a prison to do it.
Really?
Well, that's what they told me.
Okay.
You didn't have to. That's what they told me.
That's the setup.
Right. And
That's how they hook you.
Of course, I couldn't fact check anything.
Yeah.
And you send your packet in, you wait in the mail or whatever, and then you go off to their little academy or whatever. And so I get there, and I'm like, hey, where's the tower? My recruiter said I'm going to be in the tower, and this like crusty old guy's like, you're going to be on the ground for 20 years.
Right. And you're like, fuck.
Yes.
I've been lied to.
Yes. And so that was kind of. I think the good thing about working in a prison is you really realize how much you are lied to in life. I'm like, you're lied across the board of everything, and you just kind of got to accept that and go like, yeah, it's another lie. Yeah.
I've been had again.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a terrible experience. 5 years. How do you make it 5 years?
Because it kept having, this is the thing about any kind of state job, is it kept having like layoffs, and it'd be like, they'd dangle it over you, like you can get out of here and you can go somewhere else, but then they'd have hiring freezes, and that's why I was stuck there.
Right.
And then the money is so good, you kind of get hooked on the money. And you're kind of looking around, I had other friends that were attorneys and stuff, and I was making more money than them, and it's kind of like, yes, this place sucks. I hate every minute of it. It just drains everything out of you. And that was about 5 years is where I couldn't take it anymore. I was gonna go work in insurance, and
you're like, the money is good.
I was also, I wrote a book about it, and that was my intention, was to write a book, because every class I had in college, nobody had worked in a prison, so they didn't know what it was. They were just, a lot of them were just professors. I had one guy that was probation, but he didn't know anything about a prison. And so prison always did fascinate me. And I think that's what it is. It fascinates everybody.
Yeah.
Because, they don't really let the media in, and then the media kind of creates what they want to create. And
they're gonna pitch the propaganda they want on it. And
and it's just, it really is. It's 99% boredom with that 1% of just pure terror,
Right.
But you get so used to it that you're falling asleep in the middle of the day room floor with 200.
While the terror.
With 200 inmates around you, because you're so it's so normal, and you get so.
It's your job, right?
Yeah.
So it's, no matter what, it becomes the norm.
It does. It becomes very norm, and then it also like, everybody says tell a story, and you kind of forget because it just becomes, just so normalized. But I remember a celebrity came in there because they were filming the movie SWAT, and he came into the housing unit, and. He's like, hey, do you want autographs? Yeah, no. And it was just because everybody's such in a horrible, horrible place, and they don't really care to know the outside world. And it was very bizarre and I felt bad for the celebrity.
Yeah.
But that was the reality. It's like everybody's stuck in prison, and they know it sucks, and they're making the best of it, and they don't really care about they really didn't care about the outside world, which is kind of odd.
Yeah. And what's the level of incarceration at the Lancaster jail? Murderers or?
Yeah, it's a maximum security, and that was another thing when I started. It was a minimal level, and then the day that I graduated from the academy, it became a level 4, is what they call it.
Lucky son of a bitch!
Yeah,
you fell right into the good stuff.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So, do they have death row?
They don't have death row. So death row's in.
That's San Quentin.
I think they got rid of actually death row. I think they commuted everybody, but it used to be at San Quentin. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what's a daily? You get to work. You work normal hours, or do you do overnight shifts?
No, you do overnight shifts, but you're working 6 to 2, or you're working 2 to 10. No family understands unless there are there's people that are related and stuff like that. I had nobody so nobody understood it, and so at the time, my wife. Your wife thinks you're out partying, and you're like, I just worked a double shift. You get held over, you can't leave. They don't allow you to leave, and then there's no phones in there, so you can't really call home.
Right.
And so it becomes very hard on people with anybody with a family, extremely hard, because not only that, everybody's taken off for holidays, especially anything that has to do with sports. Everybody just calls in sick, and so you're forced to do all this overtime, and
brutal.
You can't get out of that place, and that was another reason that I hated it. There are people that like it. There's people I still know people that are still there, and I don't get it, but they're there.
Do you think that they like the power of it? Is that?
I think so, but I also think it's easy. It's you're just housing and feeding people. You're not the whole thing about having to rehabilitate like
No one's trying to do that.
no, they spent like a couple $1 million putting that on everybody's uniform. Nobody's being real about it. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
No. And that was another thing that I never liked about it either was, yeah, I get it. You committed a crime, but they lump everybody together. You're putting the murderers in there with somebody that basically larceny,
Theft
walked off
and,
with somebody,
stole cars,
and you're throwing everybody in together, and in an 8x10 cell, and could we have some drapes here? Maybe make it nice. Nope.
No.
And then you've got this policy that you're supposed to enforce, and it's like, really, the guy's got his towel up on the door, and that they focus on that, and they tell you've got to go get this guy and make sure that he doesn't have his towel up, and so it just gets ridiculous. And
yeah, I mean, I've never spoken to a prison guard, but I've spoken to plenty of people in prison, and people who got out of jail or whatever, and they all say the same thing. It's always basically just like, I learned more about being a criminal in jail than I did out of jail.
Well, because you would think like, hey, let's talk about our feelings once we're in here. Let's get some education going. Let's have a group or something like that. Nope, you're not required to do anything. And it always, kind of blew my mind that, most people, their parents are waking them up with a hug or something like that. Their families abandon them. They're, hey, how'd your dad wake you up? He put cigarettes off on my head, out of my head, or threw coffee in my face or whatever.
Yeah.
You kind of read their files, and it's very, very dysfunctional families, a lot of abandonment, that's what it comes down to, is that these are people. Yes, they committed crimes, but they really are people that did not have love, and from an early age, you talk to these guys, and they were abandoned by their family, living on the street. 9 years old,
and
dropped out of school, like just stuff that you think would be crazy. Dropped out in the 3rd grade, never went back, or just no support system. So,
Yeah, I mean, our system in America is set up to create problems, and a lot of people are like, well, how did this keep happening? You're like, what do you mean? How does it keep happening? We're a fucking obsessive culture that literally leaves kids.
Yeah,
to fend for themselves.
They're always talking about what they care about. Nobody cares about kids. I mean, that's the reality, and it is very sad. And I think that prison touches everybody. You look at, you're always hearing about the incarceration rate, but for those guys, it's kind of like somebody going to college or hey, where'd you, you're talking on the yard about where you went, where you served time, and it's cool that you got out of Pelican Bay, or that, the low-level joints, that's, you only did county time. So they all kind of know each other, and it's a whole network. And so you really do need to go in there and kind of change everybody's mind by educating them, and that's not being done. And it's with anything. I don't think it's ever going to be done, with kind of all the different classifications that we have for things that are wrong with our society. We just keep hearing the same thing over and over again,
Yeah, we're not going to fix anything, especially at this point, but that's terrible. All right, and so then you leave there, just couldn't do it anymore. What was the final straw that made you go?
It just became their, for me, it was just kind of it's like a half hour walking from the parking lot to the housing unit. You're housing and feeding these guys. It's hot. It's the desert. Your family doesn't understand nobody understands what you do. And like my mom was bringing gift baskets to prisons being told by her church that they didn't have running water. And so nobody understands what you're doing. So you can't talk to anybody. You'll see people you'll see somebody at a birthday party or something, and just, you can tell they have no idea what goes on in prison. They don't, I've been out of there, probably 18 years, and I still get, how's the prison going? Because nobody's listening to you.
Right.
That's the reality, is nobody really cares.
No, they don't. And it's one of those situations too, where it's like, that sounds like an incredibly fascinating job, but like you said, most days it's probably just boring as fuck. And so you're just like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah, and I always, I would go and, one of the things I did is I would collect all the prison weapons. I was trying to get like an art show, but none of these art places none of the museums stuff cared about it. I thought it was fascinating.
So these are like makeshift weapons?
Yeah, because these guys are very smart.
Yeah, they're shivs.
It's just what they use their intelligence for. But that's the thing. that stuff fascinated me. It didn't fascinate other people, but you would regularly go around and strip everything out of their cells, and within a day or two, they'd have all this other property. It was kind of this mass consumption. That interested me. I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So you would confiscate their contraband because it'd usually be shivs or shanks, or tattoo guns were really cool.
Right.
And I took them to different curators. They could care less. They didn't want any of it. But I would take that to colleges and speak. And so that helped with like visuals at colleges and stuff like that. But the colleges aren't teaching.
Yeah, they don't care about
No, they don't care. No.
What there's no money in that for them, so
Yeah,
that's what college is about here. What are some of the more interesting weapons? Like what are they using to make weapons? What were the ones that you were like, wow, that's
the number one thing for
the
me,
engineering is impressive here.
You would give them, the engineering was always impressive. Like the tattoo guy, I'll go back to the shank. The shank we give them, they get a state issue cup. Well, they'd melt that down and make a shank out of that. And,
wow.
It's a perfect thing. It's made out of plastic. It's hard plastic.
Yeah.
So anything was, you take metal out of something, take the wood off of here, whatever it was. The tattoo gun was the motor from a Walkman, a Bic pen, and a guitar string. So the motor is rapidly hitting that on your skin, and then they're making the ink out of ash. So they would burn something kind of in a paper bag and then scrape it and mix it with toothpaste, and that would be the ink.
Wow.
So stuff like that was always.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing.
And they're making Pruno. They're making all the time. We're finding that all the time. So they're
that's the toilet wine or whatever it is, the fruit wine.
Yeah.
Wow. So, how often are you seeing actual stabbings? Like, how often does someone get stabbed in a prison?
I mean, they're every day. So you have 4 yards. So that stuff's going on all the time.
All the time.
All the time. It's just that whether or not you see it or not, or, it kind of comes to the point of, it wasn't really a fight, because stuff does get serious. I did see one guy that was murdered by his cellmate, because it is all, it's all run by gangs, and
right.
It's all about making money. And
I had a friend who went to jail, and he's Italian. But he was in, I don't even know, somewhere in the valley. I think it was like a county thing, but he ended up just kind of having to hang with the Mexicans. They basically kind of adopted him into the group because he didn't want to be a part of the white supremacists. Right.
And it's very, no one wants to hear it, but it is segregated, and they segregate themselves, and the administration always tries to come in and unsegregate them, and it doesn't ever work.
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, why don't we have more violence?
Yes.
Great plan.
And so I don't know the answer to solve the solution for that one, but
yeah, I mean, you put criminals in small spaces, they're not going to behave.
Yeah, it's like I would always say, people. I think the number one question people would always ask is, are they having sex with each other?
Right.
Yeah, all the time, wouldn't you? I mean, if you're sitting in a cement box and your cellmate after 10 years is like, hey, I'll blow you for a Snickers bar, doesn't sound like it's a bad idea,
Yeah.
Because you're in prison. So
yeah, and
that's just what people nobody wants to talk. Nobody does talk about it. So yeah,
I mean. I guess I understand why they're not talking about it, but I think everyone just assumes that it's happening. Like, in my mind, that's what goes on. There's just like some alphas that just fuck the other dudes.
Yeah, because you have, especially like in AdSeg or the whole, where you don't have a TV or a radio. I mean, that's kind of my thing where I always say Epstein did do it. That's because you would see people, you put them in a cement box, and you would watch them go crazy. Because there's nothing for you to do, and I think I think your brain is designed for it's time to go, buddy.
Yeah,
we're not getting out of this.
You're like, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, so if you took somebody, and you would see it especially with
someone who's lived on their own island and penthouses.
You very rarely had somebody that had extreme wealth that went through, especially to prison, because a lawyer usually got them.
You can get them out. Yeah.
So
the way the system's set up it was
normally people that were so used to prison. That was the thing. I never knew anything about gangs, never knew anything about prison, jail, anything like that. But all those guys did. And so they're very comfortable with it. And I think that's psychologically what it is that when you've been to juvenile hall, you've been to juvie, you've been to CYA, whatever it is, as a kid growing up, it normalizes it. And then going and visiting inside of there, I was always scared to death. It's still, you're crazy if you're not scared to be in a prison.
Yeah.
But it does normalize.
The thought of it just terrifies
with kids are coming in every single day to visit their family.
Right.
So it is very normalized.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something I ever hope to experience.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
It's one of those things where you're just like, wow, it is terrible.
And that is a deterrent for me. Like, I'm like, now that I know what it's like, I know that I will never go there. If somebody comes up and wants to start a fight with me, they can just punch me in the face because I am not punching you back. I am not going. Our system, especially our legal system, is so screwed.
It's so funny.
I know that public pretender is not going to help me out in court. So,
well, there's a lot of in podcasts in general. There's a lot of similar discussions that go on, especially with comedians, because comedians most of the time are talking to other comedians on podcasts. But I honestly think this might be the first podcast where someone said Epstein probably killed himself. It's just that mentality. I'm like, that's hysterical, because the amount of times I've heard people be like, oh, the Clintons did it or whatever.
Oh, I always get, I've stopped. I used to buy into it, but I would always get, you're a Fed. And I'm just thinking, what would a Fed be doing on Instagram? And I don't care about you.
Yeah. They don't give a shit. So you got out of it. What did you do then? What do you do when you leave?
So then I went to parole.
You did get into parole then.
I went into parole.
The dream finally came to fruition.
Which I realized wasn't a dream, but yeah. But I just think, you know what, it's with everything. It's, you kind of get to that point where eventually
a job's a job.
I did comedy, many years ago, and then my daughter got sick. She has epilepsy, and so I had to give up that dream. And so at least I had a job, that had health insurance, and that was, for a long time, that was the most important thing.
Yeah. As a type 1 diabetic, I didn't have health insurance through most of my 20s. I just worked like shit jobs because I was doing comedy and all that stuff. And then I started getting really sick, and right around that time I started getting really sick, I started booking commercials. And I grew this big stupid mustache, and I did it for fun, but then I'd go to these auditions, and then people were like, you look hilariously stupid, you're in the commercial. And so I'm like, I'd go in to play like a waiter on a commercial, and they would be like, you're not right for this, but come back in an hour because we're doing a roofer scene, and you've got a great look for that. And I'd be like, what? And I'd show up, and they'd just be like, this is good, you're going to get this. And I'd be like, wow, okay. So then I got health insurance. And then I went into diabetic shock, like within 3 months of getting health insurance. And I was in Providence Hospital in Burbank for like 6-7 days. Wow. And when I got out and they sent me my bill for what I owed, I was just like, this is catastrophic. I owed like $8,000 or something. But then I'm like reading the bill, and I'm like, wait, they just charged, it was like $125,000 or something for all the stuff. I'm like, I guess I'm glad I had health insurance.
Oh yeah, it's such a racket, and
the whole system's set up. Everyone's getting their piece, and
when something doesn't happen to you, because I was always kind of a healthy person. And when my daughter got sick and started having seizures, I didn't even know where the hospital was, and I never really knew how to navigate any of this. And it is just as dysfunctional as the prison system is.
Yep.
It was.
I'm constantly blown away by it now. Like, my kids as of now don't have any major issues, but I obviously have health stuff I have to deal with. My wife had some stuff she has to deal with. I don't understand any system where healthcare is a for-profit system, and not just on like the hospital's purpose is to make a bunch of money. The doctor's purpose is to make a bunch of money. The insurance company's purpose is to make a bunch of money. And I'm just like, capitalism shouldn't be involved in this system, but it is, because it's America. And I'm fascinated by people who are like, we don't need universal health care because the system works. And you're like, how often do you go to the doctor? And they're like, I don't know, once every 4 years. And you're like, oh. So people who don't have to use the system think the system is fine. But anyone who has to use the system, you're just like, oh, this is fucked.
Yeah.
But
and then you're trying to explain to other people, and they just kind of look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah, they're just like, who
and then
cares?
they want to tell you how great their insurance is, and
right.
I don't have any problems.
And you're like, yeah, you go to the doctor maybe for a physical if you have to do it for a health exam or something. But everyone I know who loves the system never goes to the doctor. I'm just like, yeah, that works out great.
Yeah, and I mean the other, like, I thought going into it, you're seeing all this stuff on social media about everybody's rallying for some sick kid or something like that, and I'm thinking, oh great, everybody's going to rally for my kid. No, nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit.
No one cared.
You go to these support systems like Epilepsy Foundation, they didn't give a shit. I mean, I would fly to different conventions, meet all these people, and they just give you. I mean, it was like talking to an agent. It was just talking to a bunch of blowing smoke up your ass,
straight up the ass.
Yeah.
The other thing I found with the support groups, like when I first got diagnosed, it was hard just because I was a comic and I ate like a comic. I ate unhealthy food and I drank, and I didn't know how to take care of myself, and so they were like, well, there's these groups you can go to, and I was just kind of mentally, I was in a dark place. So I'm like, I didn't understand what it was going to take, and like now I understand I have an inconvenient disease. It's not the end of the world. It's just annoying. I can't eat dessert. I have to give myself shots, that kind of stuff. But my life is fine. It's not any different than it was before in reality. But I would go to these groups because I'm just trying to grasp what my life is going to be, and it's always type 2, which is not me. And so I'd go and sit in there, and it'd be me and like 20 people, and they'd all just talk about how they need to exercise more and do this and do that. And I'm just sitting there like, and then the lady who was running the group would go, now, Richard, this doesn't apply to you, but, and then I'm like, what am I doing here? It was 20% of the stuff was useful to me, or it was like, these are foods that you can eat that have a lower glycemic index and stuff like that. I'm like, okay. And then the rest of it's like, so everyone except for Richard. I'd be like, oh, this fucking bullshit. And there was just another thing. So some lady got paid money to teach this class.
Yeah, I for a long time was just trying to get empathy. I was just trying to get somebody to feel for me, and it took me years to realize that's never going to happen.
They just don't care.
Yeah, and especially like on these online support groups, I was getting screamed at by people. Like I was trying to get there's no laws for epilepsy, so people can discriminate. You can put YouTube has fake seizure videos that they won't take down. Pretty much all of them do.
What does that mean?
Like people filming themselves and making money, and it's a fake seizure. So it's not helping. Basically my kid gets bullied because the other kids think seizures are funny. And
okay.
So it's giving this perception that epilepsy is no big deal. I mean, epilepsy's been around thousands of years.
Right.
It kills more people than breast cancer. And
wow.
I mean, there's 60 million people worldwide. There's 3 million. And there's 60,000 children, and none of these schools, like the school wasn't required, my daughter's school wasn't required to carry her medication. I had to take her out of the school because I would sit there and wait for her to have a seizure in the morning. So it's just debilitating, and you're just having PTSD all the time because it's happening over and over again. So I would, try to talk to unions, and they didn't care. I tried to talk to politicians, no responses whatsoever.
No.
People that are saying, hey, vote for me. They really don't care.
Yeah, if it's not affecting their kid, then they're not going to give a second.
And I tried to focus on getting this law passed, and I wrote the law myself, and it was just a very simple law, which is, hey, could we train teachers to know what a seizure looks like? Because you have your kid there for 8 hours of the day, and nobody knows what a seizure is. Nobody knows what epilepsy is. So I would go to school sometimes. My kid would have a seizure. She'd be on the yard. She wouldn't even know who she was or who her teacher was, and the school wasn't required to do anything, so they'd be like, it's no big deal.
Right.
So
there's a lot of things that teachers should be required to know how to do, just like simple medical related things. Like that seems like one that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, same with law enforcement. We're all, I've been pulled over while she's had a seizure in the car, and the police think that she's drunk, and I'm like, she's 6. Come on, guy.
Right.
I mean, that was she's 15 now. It's years ago.
Yeah.
She actually went through about 5 years of different doctors. And she got a VNS implant, which is the vagus nerve stimulator. So it actually is an implant, and it hooks to your vagus nerve, and it's sending impulses to your brain. So she's been seizure-free for 5 years because of that. She's got to get the battery changed next week.
Wow, that's great.
But it's great technology. It's been around 20 years, but it's not at all hospitals. It's
right.
It's the hospital's agenda of what they want to give you. And
who's paying who?
Yeah. It's all
on the back
and
end
everything with hospitals is pharmaceutical oriented, so it's always giving more and more drugs. So that's why I did like the VNS because it's not a drug.
Right.
You just have to change the battery, and her battery lasted 7 years. So it lasted. I was hoping for 1 month of no seizures. It's been 7 years. So
That's
been
awesome.
absolutely fantastic. It's totally changed her life. She wasn't regressing at one point past the 2nd grade. She made the honor roll this year. I mean, as a parent, it was
That means a ton.
phenomenal. Yeah. Just to watch your kid be able to just to keep up was huge. And
Right.
that's all that I was asking for.
That's amazing. Well, that's
got that
cool.
with that.
Yeah, that's great news. Nice to have some victories along the way.
Yes.
So then she's 15 now, you said?
Yes.
And so goes to school normal.
So, yep, totally normal, and is able to keep. I was afraid that she couldn't. There were times where she couldn't keep up. She would pretty much have a seizure, and then it would erase her memory. So remember,
Right.
that was very hard, where she couldn't remember her teacher and couldn't remember basic things. And I just kind of got in a pattern of when she said, "I can't remember," I would say, "I understand. It's okay."
Right.
My parents would scream at me, but
Yeah.
I didn't remember something.
How old was she when she started having seizures?
So she started having them at 2, and she didn't. It was out of the blue. It was before her 2nd birthday, and we rushed her to the hospital, and she flatlined at the hospital, and
Wow.
huge ordeal. You're kind of, that was another thing about her seizures were at night in her sleep, so we'd have to watch her all night long, and it really affects work and everything, and nobody at work cares.
Yeah.
Your boss hates you no matter, the boss could care less.
Right. He's just going to go, well, we'll get someone who doesn't have a kid that has that,
Right,
so that
exactly.
I don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
So it was just extremely hard for many years for my wife and I. But we would usually be going to the ER, and you're watching ER on TV, and everybody's gung ho, and everybody's there just waiting so
Burn
you
the
leave.
fuck out.
Yeah. They do not want you there. And
Yeah.
so I could tell early on, like, they hated us coming there because we'd usually come there at like 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's the time you're drinking your coffee. That's your break time. You don't want anybody coming
Right.
in there. No.
Yeah, I went to the ER once on Thanksgiving, and the way they basically treated us was like we're the biggest piles of shit that ever lived, and they were mad that they had to be there at all.
Yeah, I
So,
felt that all the time.
I'm just like, hey, Sarah. Wow, okay. And so then what do you do now? You doing the parole thing now?
So I do. I'm a parole agent. Yeah. So that's something I can't talk about because it's my job, right?
Yeah. All right, fair enough.
That's why I could talk about prison because I haven't been there in a long time. Yeah.
You
And prison's
left
much
a
more
while ago.
fascinating. Yeah.
Do you still have relationships with people from the prison? Like, not prisoners, obviously, but like you still keep
Yeah,
in
and there's
contact?
still prisoners that I see. I mean, you got to know those guys, so there's no.
I guess, yeah, in
Like
your
kind
parole.
of that's the odd part about it is that you're getting to know them because you're forced to get to know them. You're feeding them, you're clothing them, you're giving them everything. So
Right.
you do get to know them on a personal level. You're just there. If you were to ever say that to administration, they'd be, "What? You're not allowed to do that."
Yeah.
But that's the reality. You're getting to know these guys. So yes, you'll see them on the outside. Sometimes they'll call you because you were basically you
were the
think it,
decent
but
one.
you were the only one that was decent to them.
Yeah.
And they might still go on and commit crimes, but they will call. I have a guy that calls me every couple of years, and he was a homeless guy living on the street, and now he picked his life. I mean, a very success story that he finally got off the street in his 60s. But
Wow.
it's still like you're still hesitant to talk to that
you don't
person
wanna
because
develop.
you know everything about that person.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing when you had, I've had a couple college friends that passed away because they OD'd. But those were people that were doing drugs in college. I mean, your body can't take it.
Right.
And so you were, even those were my friends from college, you're still hesitant also.
Yeah.
Talk to those people,
Yeah. I mean, I knew some people that did a lot of like coke and different things when we were in our 20s, and then now some of them are like in their 50s, and I'm like, you just can't do this for 30 years.
Yeah, I
without-
definitely don't think I think when you look at it, especially like the rock star that ODs at 50, they don't like to say that they're ODing, but that's usually what's going on.
Yeah.
Your body just can't take that anymore.
Yeah, your heart's just basically worn down at that point. Yeah, that's fucking terrible.
Like I always I loved Hunter S. Thompson as a writer,
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
his son wrote a book about him, and he was just talking about he's 69 doing all these drugs.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're doing that.
Yeah, he's my favorite writer, but it's one of those things, like his suicide note when he finally killed himself, you're like, this is what he did.
Yeah, he was basically, he stayed at home all the time and just did drugs. Yeah, that was him.
At the end, he was like, I can't even do drugs anymore. So what's the point of living?
Yeah.
He was in a wheelchair at that point. He couldn't go blow stuff up. Like
hip surgery.
His passions in life were doing drugs, partying, and weapons.
And I think that's, I loved Charles Bukowski, but you see how they just those guys neglected their family, and kind of the media props them up and talks about how wonderful the people, they never knew them, but they talk about how wonderful they were. And I kind of look at it like, they abandoned their family. Yeah. They weren't the greatest people in the world.
Yeah. They're a piece of shit who knows how to write. That's a skill set in there somewhere.
But to me, that's the sad part. It's like you're sitting there in a home and your family doesn't want to see you because you burned them so many times.
Yeah, I mean, like Hunter Thompson shot his nurse, or he had like a lady, a caretaker.
Yeah,
and her job was to take care of him and make sure he was all right. One night, he's yelling in his room, and he apparently would just scream and yell sometimes because he's on drugs and partying. Sure. And so she came and started knocking on the door, asking if he was okay, and he shot her with a shotgun through the door. And then she's like bleeding, and she's like, it was like just bird shot or something. So it wasn't like he, blasted her with a sawed off, but he was like, "Oh, I thought you were a bear."
Right, it's normal. Yeah.
And she's like, "Why'd you think I'm a bear? I'm inside the house." And he was like, "Well, if you are a bear, I don't want you coming into my." And she was just like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, sounds like Hollywood.
Yeah, and her family nowhere to be seen because they're like, "I'm not going to get fucking shot by this asshole. I'm going to let the caretaker take care of the."
Yeah, and I'm sure his first phone call was to a publicist. "Hey, spin this for me."
Yeah. And they were like, "You're Hunter Thompson. It's going to be fine. People will think it's hilarious."
Yeah. Exactly.
So then, do you still live in LA area?
I do. I've decided that this is LA is a shithole, but it's my shithole, and I intend to stay. Everybody else is leaving. No way.
Yeah, me neither.
No, I'm here.
People keep going. Where would you consider going? I'm like, nowhere.
Yeah, you know what? I went and looked at other places. I everybody's like, you gotta go to Texas, and I went there, and it's like it was biblical weather. It's like frogs flying out of the air, and I'm like, no, I can't. I can't.
Too humid.
It's cheap.
Too many assholes.
You can't even walk down the street. It's so humid. Yeah.
But the nice parts of Texas aren't even cheap anymore.
No,
so it's like,
you're right. It's not.
It's great. Like the people I know who live there, I'm like, yeah, if I bought a place 30 years ago, then it would be a cool place to live. But it's spending LA. It's like just below LA and San Francisco pricing, and like Austin. You're like, I don't want to live in Wichita Falls or like someplace. Like I don't know.
I looked at Arizona and I got out of the car and it was like nuclear heat, and this isn't happening. No.
Yeah. And it's dry heat.
It's the weather here, 100%. I mean, you got the greatest weather I've ever seen.
Yeah. And people are like, you could move to San Diego. I'm like, it's the same shit. It's literally just the same place. Yeah. So I've been stuck in horrible traffic in San Diego so many times. I'm like, this isn't better. Do you want to ask some questions? Step in?
Sure.
Yeah? All right, we're going to take a break for a second, and then we'll set up Sarah, and she'll ask some more questions, too.
Great.
Cool. We'll be right back.
Say hi to everyday people.
All right, guys, we're back. Sarah is here. We're going to ask some more questions of Mike Knox.
Yeah, I mean, I came in late, full disclosure. Mm-hmm. I have not been as present. I'm fascinated by the California prison system. So how long ago did you get out, so to speak?
I want to say 18 years ago. I was there 5 years.
Now, were you ever near people who had to do solitary?
Oh, yeah, I worked in solitary confinement for 5
You did?
For 3 years, yeah. I liked solitary because normally they're out of their cells all the time.
They are?
Yeah, in solitary, they're down for 23 hours out of the day. They go out for a few hours out on the yard, but the yard is connected to solitary. So it's, there's less movement. And that's what you want. That's what you want when you have, I mean, you've got 1,000 inmates on a yard with 16 officers.
Those are terrible numbers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
very good in math, but they're not.
They
good.
don't allow that in schools. They don't allow that number system, like
No.
one teacher per however many students. So
Yeah,
60
well-
cars for 1,000.
At this point, you're way more likely to get killed in the school than the prison. So,
Oh, it's so
Very
unfortunate.
true.
yeah.
So the guys in solitary, what do you think about solitary?
The only thing about solitary is that it would make me go crazy because there's no radio, there's no TV. That, like, they're punishing them, and it's like, really, just give them a TV. Just let the guys watch TV, you know?
Yeah.
And so the punishment system to me is just odd because they're not going anywhere. You're in solitary confinement because you committed a crime in the prison, so it's the jail of the prison.
A prison
Jail
within the
within
prison.
jail, yeah. Russian doll this thing down.
Do you
Yeah.
think that people go in crazy and then they come out more crazy?
Oh,
Or,
sure, yeah,
But they go in crazy.
yeah.
How often are people jerking off?
24 hours a day. I mean,
Oh my God! So you've had to see people do it.
yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah.
And are there rules against that? Are
Yeah.
they not supposed to do that?
There is, but it's like, I'm certainly not going to write the guy up for it. I mean, there are people that will write him up for it, and it's
Yeah.
like then you got to go to court and you got to take time off to go
Explain.
to court and you got to talk about this, and then the DA is going to pick up the case or whatever, and you're really going to strike this guy out for this,
Right.
which happens, but
Do you see guys trying to better themselves in prison a lot? Like, I feel like I hear stories on podcasts about like, oh, I learned law so that I can defend myself.
yeah, it's just very rarely. Most of them are just having fun. I mean, they really are. I know nobody wants to hear this, but they're having fun. I mean, and because you're fed and you're housed, and you don't have to worry about your old lady screaming in your ear, and they cycle
You
in and
become
out.
friends with people
Well,
if
that's
you're
what I
not
mean.
already friends. So.
That's what I mean is you see the same guys that come back, and they recognize you, and then they also recognize you because they know that you know how to do your job. Because that's the other thing is new people come in and they screw everything up,
Right.
and that's all you want out of the day is just for things to go smoothly because it takes so long. It takes you 4 hours to feed them,
Right.
and that's 3 meals a day. So they're walking to that chow hall. That's a long time to get all those people to walk there, and that's what I liked about solitary confinement is they're fed in their cells. You're you're feeding them. You're giving them the trays and stuff like that.
Right.
And people looked at that like that was too much work. I just looked at it like they're not coming out. So
Yeah.
that's great.
What do you feed someone in solitary confinement?
I mean, they're fed.
The normal food.
It's just that the food is mass produced, so it doesn't have a lot of taste. But I'm sure I see on TikTok all the time people making prison food at home. They've just making ingredients and stuff like that. So these guys
Yeah.
come up with these spreads, and
That's-
they're always saying, "Hey, you want to try this?"
I was doing shows in Vegas like a month ago, and it's like the closest to LA that Chris's tour gets. So there's a bunch of random celebrities that came out, whatever, and we're hanging out backstage, and it was like Flea was there and like random people like that, and Mike Tyson shows up. And we're all just like, oh, Mike Tyson's here. Yeah. So it's Tyson and his wife. And this is maybe 2 or 3 weeks after he got in trouble for punching that
Oh, the
guy on the
plane.
airplane or whatever.
That guy deserved it.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Everyone agreed he deserved it. And Tyson's just like, there's only so much I can take. And I'm just like, this is the best. So we're all sitting around kind of talking, and he walks over and he's like, hey, do you work here? And I know he said it because I'm the only white guy. So he's like, there's no way he's part of the crew. He obviously works for the casino or whatever. And I go, oh, I mean, I kind of do. I'm the opening comic. And he's like, what's the deal with the ramen? Is that for everybody? And I go, yeah, I mean, if you want some of the ramen, you can have it. He's like, I don't usually eat it, but I ate it when I was in jail. And
It's money.
yeah, he's like, it literally reminds me of like a specific thing. My mouth is watering. I'm like, yeah, man, get down on that ramen. So he gets the ramen out, and he's eating. His wife's like, I can't believe you're eating Chris's ramen. And he's like, that guy said I could have it. And so then he's like, if you really want to make it good, and then he starts giving me the whole recipe. And I'm just like, I go, I'm probably not gonna be in prison. He's like, you just never know. You get a packet of hot sauce, you crush up some Cheez-Its or cheese nips. It does not matter. And I'm just like, he's like, you mix that in. I'm just like, and then there was 3 or 4 other ingredients. I'm just like, this is the grossest sounding
prison
thing
chef.
I've ever heard.
Top chef prison.
But he was all about it. And for some reason, the cheese nips is really a key ingredient.
Flavor.
Because eating is the focal point of your day. That's
Yeah.
why.
That's
it
the best
really
part.
is.
I would think.
There really is no sports is very exciting. So there's everybody's talking about sports, gambling on sports.
Right.
But that just makes the day go by faster. They call it your program. I got my program down, which is because you're doing your state time.
Right.
So I got that program down. And ramen, especially there's you see cigarettes in there, but they got rid of smoking. So
Right.
ramen is your money, and that's what you're betting with. Or like you go into their cells and you see somebody with 50 bottles of shampoo, you're like, that's the shot caller on the yard.
Right.
Because he's got so much stuff. And so that's what they're doing. They're trading goods, which is the thing that I was always interested in.
The bartering of prison.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating because if we've forgotten how to make things from scratch anymore. Like what my grandfather used to do, making stuff out of wood and stuff like that, that's gone. But those guys know how to do that. I mean, you do learn a lot of stuff if you're paying attention. Like I never knew, and I still can't believe this to the fact that the lighter was invented before the match was. So they'll create lighters. They'll get that filament and get batteries, and they'll get that little spark. They'll shave some fuzz off their socks, and that's an igniter. So there's all sorts of things.
They're innovators.
Yeah, engineering.
And
There's
Yeah.
engineering.
Some of the greatest artists also, I would always say, they're always saying, hey, can I draw a picture for you? And I would always say, yeah, draw a picture of you stabbing me on the tear. I would never do that. But one guy left me a picture of that when he got released, of him stabbing me on the tear.
That's
So
beautiful.
you do get to know them, and you get to know them where I would say they are your friends for that amount of time. I mean, there's certain
Work friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
I worked
you
in
have more
restaurants
problems with the people that you work with.
Yeah.
Far more problems with the people that you work with than
the other
inmates.
prison guards or
Because the inmates know, and it's like with police. It's a very one-sided. I just want to get home. I'm about to lose my job and my house, and everything's falling apart. I just want to get home and put a bullet in my head.
Right.
But here's a guy on a motorcycle with a mustache, and he's also about to lose everything, but he's still got this job and this power, and he's going to take it out on you, and you got to sit there and take it.
Right.
That's the same thing with prison. They to an extent have to take it because those are the ones in the uniforms telling them what to do.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not reasonable, things to do. Like one of the things that I always hated was, especially in solitary confinement, it's like, really, it's one roll of toilet paper a week. Can we give them two?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Did you
no
ever
reason.
help anybody out and give them a little extra if they were
Oh,
good
sure.
or nice?
The thing is, you're trying to do your job, which is when you're in solitary confinement, it like your shower, they get a shower 3 times a week, right? But you've got to shower that whole tier, which is like 60 people. So if those guys, they're supposed to only take 15 minutes of a shower, you're not going to tell somebody if they want to take a shower longer, they're not going to get out of the shower. So
Right.
if you can give them extra state stuff or whatever, and they're cool with you, you're cool with so they're gonna get out of the shower quicker. So it's all just about time management, and some
Right.
people can't figure that out. But if you can figure that out, your day's gonna go a lot quicker.
How do you get the ramen to start with? Like, how do you build your supply?
Because there's a canteen, so there's a canteen, and they draw.
People put money into account
Yeah,
for you,
yeah.
and you can
get
buy-
packages.
Yeah.
So you can come in wealthy.
Oh yeah,
like
but
somebody-
most people don't. But yeah, a lot of people, like I had
You,
one.
you have to have people who care about you to basically put money
Yeah.
into the account
Right.
for you.
And
Yeah.
then, a bit amount of money is going pretty far. I remember one guy screaming at me because I need to let him out because he was going to go get pizza. I was like, what are you talking about? And sure enough, some organization came in and brought pizza. So there's all these outside organizations coming in, bringing them stuff all the time. So, comedy shows are coming in there, stuff like that.
Yeah.
How do they make contact to get that in?
Because they're just calling the front desk of the prison, and the prison's usually
Who's calling the front desk?
whoever wants to do like
Like a prisoner's mother.
Oh yeah, that's happening all the time.
Yeah,
People are
is
calling 'cause-
and putting money in, or like saying like, I want to buy this for so and so.
Yeah, they're just they especially you can do it easy online now, but you can put money on people's books and
I remember Pete used to do it for his sister,
Pete.
Pete C.
Oh really? Oh yeah.
He'd be like, she got busted for drugs or something, and he'd be like, yeah, I got to go I told my sister I'd put $100 on her thing, whatever, and I'd be like, wow, what can she get with that? And he's like, a surprising large amount.
Yeah.
And she would call and ask him sometimes, like, hey, I don't have any money on there.
And the calling, like, is that also money? Like, does it cost money to call out?
I don't know if it's changed, but yes, it used to. When I was in there, it was MCI. Was that one of the places?
Yeah.
So it was like $10 a minute, something ridiculous.
Oh,
where,
wow. Yeah.
again, it was how
It'd
some
be like
company
a
can
collect-
come in and make, and
Yeah.
so, but they're not paying for it. And
Yeah.
so, they're on the phone all the time. The problem is, and you would hear their conversations too. And the conversations sometimes were fascinating. Like, there was like a couple of Death Row Records guys that were there. You know, they've gotten out since, but they were serving life sentences, and you would hear them talking to their attorneys and you know their legal issues and stuff like that. Most of the conversations were 24 hours a day trying to get money out of the family, but
Right.
you would hear some interesting stuff, and there would be semi-famous people. I mean, like Freeway Ricky Ross was there, a very nice guy and very humble. And I say that only because most of the time you're dealing with people that are throwing shit at you,
Right.
and here's a guy that is doing life. He's gotten out since, but he was a big cocaine dealer in South Central,
Right.
and so those are the celebrities for those guys. They all know those
it's
people are
big
the
time.
celebrities. I was telling Rick that they came in and filmed, and the inmates didn't really seem to care about the
The cameras.
celebrities. But if you're a street celebrity, those guys are what's important to them.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You're the cocaine supplier for South Central.
And you would
It's
never
gonna be
never know somebody like him, very
calm and casual.
and because when I started there, so there was no internet really. When I started there, so they'd be like, "That's Rick," and I'd be like, "I have no idea who that is," you know, because I couldn't go Google it. So
What an
Sounds like-
idiot. He doesn't even know.
Know who a Rick is.
Listen, all the Ricks are big time cocaine dealers. You said you wrote a book.
So I did. I wrote a book about prison, and I wrote a book about my daughter's epilepsy.
Do you want to promote those? Can people buy them somewhere?
Yes. Yeah. You can buy them anywhere. There. Straight Fish is the prison book, and Straight Fish is when you're a brand new person. They call you, so they're not being derogatory towards you, but it's
What
a
does that
derogatory
mean?
term. Means you're brand new.
It's like fresh fish.
Straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I probably should have called it something else because nobody knows what that means. But
I
you live
only
and learn. You know.
Yeah, I
What
only
did
know what
do?
it means because of Shawshank. So,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
yeah,
And then the other
because
one.
you're trying to reel them in or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you're the new when they put them on into the yard. They're called fish. And You're
Okay.
brand new, and then of course when you're a brand new officer, you got your brand new uniform.
suits
So everybody
on.
knows exactly who you are. You get your fresh haircut. They know
Yeah.
exactly who you are. So they're gonna exactly try to manipulate you and get you to do stuff. And yeah, so yes, that stuff. I mean, that stuff does happen, but mostly all your stuff comes in through visiting.
Right.
Because there's such it's a city, so stuff is, yes, there's a front gate, but there's also a back gate that nobody talks about, that all these other people are coming in. You got doctors and teachers and,
Right.
just kind of line staff, cooks. So it's going on all the time. So I say that it used to kind of bother me, they'd be like, that person's bringing in dope or whatever, but then you would see it and go, yeah, they're right. That's all the stuff, it's going on all the time.
Did anybody ever try to escape?
Yeah, but for the most part, they don't. And the reason that they don't is I think you could easily, you kind of hear about people that walk out of county jail. It is hard to walk out of county jail, and it's hard to walk in there if you didn't know how to get in there. There's another reason that I say Epstein probably did it, because it's hard for you to get into places,
Right.
Especially if you were a Fed. Feds don't come into prisons.
Right.
Unless he was in I don't know if he was in a Fed place or not, but there's usually no cameras anywhere.
I think he was he in Riker or something? I don't remember.
No idea.
We discussed earlier. He's the first person in the history of podcasts to say he thinks that Epstein killed himself. I said, this is a rarity. I've never heard anyone put this theory out there.
Well, I always thought he did.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy that got massages 3
That's what we're
times
saying,
a day
like, what
from
his
young
life
girls, and then you
became.
go in there, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden, everything you've ever known is gone.
And nobody's going to, I guarantee you, the people working on the officers working on that tier, who are probably like I was, you're just taking a little siesta there.
Yeah.
You could care less about him.
Sure.
You're not sitting there talking to him. You think he's a piece of crap.
Yeah.
And so you're going to tell him he's a piece of crap. You're not going to cater to him.
Yeah, you're
Right.
not enamored by
No,
some
not at all.
prisoner.
No.
You're like,
Especially
oh,
somebody
another
what
guy.
he did. You would hate that guy. And that's the one
Yeah.
thing about prison is everybody hates the stuff
Child
that he did.
molesters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fuck those people.
Yeah, I
They are
definitely
bottom of
think
the barrel.
he's
Yep.
like, I'm not getting out by.
That
Never.
definitely does happen. I mean, prison justice is there. It will always be there.
Yeah.
But again, you've stripped all these guys from everything,
Yeah.
I mean, they're starting from nothing. That's why I think those are the people if society ends. They're the ones who are going to thrive. It's not me.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to be like, I've literally had nothing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's time to flourish in this nothingness. And
right.
you had a book about your
daughter's
daughter, too. What was that
Yes,
called?
that's Vivian's Reign. My daughter's name is Vivian.
Vivian's Reign.
Rain, REI.
Rain. The reason that I say that is when she would before having seizures, she would say, it's raining in my head.
Oh.
So it was just kind of, that was one of her things, was it was hard for her as a child to explain what was going on.
Right.
Granted, I understand.
Yeah.
That was one of the little catchphrases she would say.
And you can get these both on
Yeah, you can get them on Amazon.
Amazon, all that.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you have
Great.
anything else you wanted to promote?
I got a website, MikeKnox.com.
Okay.
And I got a TikTok, which is Famous Graves. So I film famous graves.
Oh,
Nice.
cool.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. So that's what I do in my spare time.
Did you go to Père Lachaise in France,
No.
where Jim Morrison's?
Yeah, Jim Morrison.
I
We're
thought
gonna
about-
steal his head.
My friend was like, Jim Morrison's buried there. I'm like, what am I going to do with what am I going to do with his grave?
I can remember going there in college because my friends wanted to go, and I'm like, sure. And there's all tons of famous people buried in Père Lachaise, and like we're standing in line to see Jim Morrison's grave, and this guy in front of me, I'm like, all right, one more person, and then he pulls out 2 cigarettes and he lights one and puts one on the grave, and then he smokes the other one, and like all the way down, I'm like, he's not
Smoking a cigarette
smoking
with
a
Jim
cigarette
Morrison.
with you.
It's obviously what was going on.
You're wasting a cigarette
Yeah.
and smoking one yourself and taking up the time of the people waiting in line. Like, I just want to get a picture and move away.
Yeah.
But whatever.
You know what you should have done?
What?
Lit him on fire. I have extremes. I apologize. Well, thank you for being on, Mike.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Thank you so
it,
much
man.
for
Very
having me.
fascinating, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
This is-
yeah,
This is the end of season
this is
1.
end of season 1. This was it.
Mike
Is
is our
it?
finale.
You're the finale, man.
Season 1
I'm
finale.
honored.
Big twist at the end. We're all going to jail. Oh,
Epstein's still alive. He's coming out.
He would be at the store for sure.
And this would be a great place for him to come back to.
Mike came to the Comedy Store during the dark ages of the early 2000s. So
He gets it.
yeah, he gets it.
Yeah.
He came here when
It was
was
more
going to close
depressing
every
than
night.
prison.
Yeah, he came here to feel worse about his life.
I will never, ever, say anything bad about anybody that does comedy.
Yeah,
It is one of the hardest things. And that was one of my things about working in a prison. I thought, if I could work in a prison, I could do stand-up.
Do
Yeah.
comedy. How long did you do comedy?
I still do it sometimes, but
Yeah.
just because of COVID, I
Yeah,
basically stopped doing it. I'll get back into it when I'm done with my job. But
nice.
it's a lot of time, and people don't realize that. I mean,
Yeah.
you're staying here. If you're coming here, you're staying here, and you're hanging out, and
Yep.
you're putting in time. You're putting in work. It's a grind.
It is.
Yeah.
It definitely
It
is.
is a grind, and I think when you're really good at comedy, it looks easy. You make it look effortless, and so then a lot of people think they can do it.
Well, and that's why you hear about it. It's so rare. Then they're just like overnight success.
yeah,
Yeah.
10 years overnight success.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Well,
you're there, man. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
We're
I'm
thankful
trying.
that you're here. We're thankful that we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rick is going on tour more.
awesome.
Yep.
So we're just taking a little pause. So this is the end of season 1, but we'll be back.
Yeah. We'll be back.
Soon.
We'll do more. We'll record more in July, and then we'll start season 2.
Yeah.
More strangers. Yeah. So thanks for listening. Season 1 was good. We met some interesting people, some real psychopaths. I still think that guy who has a website about paying back money of things you stole, he's either, mark my words, he's either going to be a serial killer or he's going to be a cult leader.
Oh, okay.
So
I thought you were going to say, or friends with the serial killer.
he will not be friends with anybody ever because he's such a weirdo. But lots of more strangers out there, so it
Yeah.
should be interesting. But thanks for being on, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
If you'd like to be a guest on our show, please DM Ingraham Pod on Twitter. That's INGRAHAM Pod on Twitter.
Goodbye to everyday people.
Special thanks to the Comedy Store and to Brian Rips for the dope-ass music.